is misaligned. This is the core reason, right? Just really part of it, because they're in these imposter systems instead of actually trying to awaken to anything. So a lot of people have been asking me for my video on how the Christian church has affected black people, but there's a far more nuanced and aggressive take that I want to have on this. That's a bit more institutional, right? I believe a lot of churches today run on something called a traditional judgment system, right? Not what Christianity was talking about inherently at all, really. Right, so we're actually we're gonna talk about the concept of this fear-based transactional God, because the earliest followers of Jesus did not believe in that. They believed in the present kingdom of God, right? Radical grace, spiritual awakening, right? But how did Jesus' message of love and liberation turn into a system or get pushed toward a system of hierarchy, fear, and judgment? We're just going to go through the breakdown because it's very interesting to me. The early church, right, from 30 to 300 AD, there's not really a traditional judgment system. Luke 17:20, right, is the kingdom of God is in your midst. Jesus was teaching that the kingdom of God was already here. God is all powerful. He's present, right? Not a distant reward. Salvation was about realizing unity with God, not earning entry into heaven. Love, not law, is the foundation of faith. John 13:34-35, right? There was no doctrine of an eternal conscious torment in hell. Hell was understood as a temporary state of separation, right? That's important. But this is actually when it gets bigger, right? The Roman takeover of Christianity in 1313 AD is probably the biggest corrupter of this traditional judgment system that a lot of people are doing instead of, what Jesus was talking about. So in 1313 AD, Emperor Constantine, he legalized Christianity, right? Through the Edict of Milan, right? But in 325, the Council of Nicaea, I don't give a damn. Christianity merged with Roman political structures. That's what I want you to get. The church, once like an underground movement of love and awakening, became an empire-backed institution, right? Roman Empire needed a way to control people. They reshaped Christianity into a rule-based system. Instead of awakening to God's presence, they were told to submit to the authority of the church. Heaven and hell became political tools. Obey the empire and the church or be damned, right? This is important. Now, some of you might still disagree with me, but we're actually going to keep going, right? Because it comes down to original sin. So in Romans 5:18, just as one trespass resulted in condemnation for all people, so also one's righteous act resulted in justification and life for all people, right? So Augustine, right, in 354, 430 AD, one of the most influential early theologians, right, developed the doctrine of original sin. He interpreted, this is big, interpreted Adam and Eve's fall as something that cursed all of humanity, making everybody guilty from birth. He also introduced the idea of eternal damnation as permanent punishment for the wicked. This changed because before Augustine, many Christians believed in universal reconciliation, the idea that everybody would eventually be restored to God. God will reach everyone. There was no one unreachable. Augustine introduced fear-based salvation, right? People were born guilty, only could escape eternal punishment through strict obedience to the church. Does this sound familiar, right? Okay, now it wasn't about Christianity waking up. It was about escaping punishment, right? So then this is when the medieval age makes it worse. So by the medieval ages, the Catholic Church controlled Europe. The church used fear of hell to manipulate kings, right? Nobles, common people. Did I say respect to God? Did I say that? Do you see the problem? Purgatory was introduced as an additional form of punishment. They was adding on, right? So that people could escape through payment, indulgences. The idea of earning salvation through good works and the church sacraments became standard. People were fully dependent on the church at this point for salvation. If they disobeyed, they could just go to hell. No one was getting saved outside of a church at this point. Do you see the problem? How this started to disconnect from where Jesus was trying to go? The church used hell, sin, and judgment as tools to control people instead of freeing them. The original message of Jesus, which was like love, unity, awakening, was completely buried under the rules, fear, and hierarchy that had built. The traditional judgment system was now fully developed. A transactional, fear-based, right, path to liberation. Okay? Completely opposite of what he was talking about. But then I can already hear somebody who's a bit more informed, right? The Protestant Reformation is relevant here. It's a step forward, but not a full fix. Okay, Ephesians 2:8 says, "For it is by the grace of God that you have been served through faith, and this is not from yourselves; it is from a gift from God." Right? Martin Luther and other reformers rejected the Catholic Church's corruption. Right? They emphasized salvation by faith alone. Right? rejecting indulgences and purgatory. However, they still maintain the idea of eternal judgment and a God of wrath. Okay, you hear this come in now. It's starting to develop. The Catholic Church lost some control, allowing people to read the Bible for themselves. However, Luther and Calvin still reinforced much of the traditional justice system. So they still taught heaven and hell as permanent destinations and not states with God. They still emphasize human sinfulness over divine love. Many Protestant churches became just as rigid as the Catholic Church, only with different rules, right? Systems of control, hierarchy, right? Things that Jesus fought against his whole life. The Reformation was in a step in the right direction, but it didn't fully break the superstructure. Okay. And in modern Christianity, this is where we get to today. Right? So Romans 8:38-39, nothing can separate us from the love of God. Over time, the traditional justice system, judgment system, became the default doctrine for almost all churches. Evangelicalism, I hate that word. Evangelicalism, there we go, I'm snapping. Fundamentalism and revivalist movements in the 1700s and 1900s doubled down on fear-based preaching. Many modern Christians no longer question the idea of eternal judgment, transactional salvation, or as God as a ruler judge, even though those are none of the things God would ever need to do as an all-powerful, all-knowing being, right? Many churches still use fear to control people, especially through hellfire sermons and end times fear-mongering. Christianity is still often more about escaping judgment than discovering divine love. The message of Jesus is often distorted, right? But his mission is seen as paying for sin rather than awakening humanity. Do you see how corrupt everything gets? But here's really the final thought. The traditional judgment system is not original gospel, right? John 8:32 says, then you will know the truth and the truth will set you free, right? That system that we're looking at that's affecting black people was created by human institutions and not God. It was built to control people, right? Not to set them free. The message of Jesus was never about fear his whole life. Right? It was about waking up. That was the whole point of that. So, I had to take y'all through like a bit of a lesson through it, but I really hope you understand like that the church wasn't really created just to control black people. It started to control all people at some point. Now, I'm Christian myself. This is a bit, different from my typical field, and I don't really argue with people about religion at all. But y'all are aware about the fact that I'm not going to debate. But this is really like a core issue why most people feel that the church is misaligned. This is the core reason.